Okay, we're rolling. Thanks for joining us, everybody, today. Today, we have a very special guest. We're going to be talking about gemmotherapy using plant stem cells for healing with Jennifer O'Brien Payeur. I'm Maria Rickard-Hong. I'm the Education and Media Director for Documenting Hope and your host. And if you have any questions, if you could just type them into the chat box, it makes it easier for me to manage them. We are going to be taking questions at the end. We've already got some questions that were emailed in, which you're always welcome to do as well. And Documenting Hope is a 501c3 nonprofit that provides root cause healing solutions for children's chronic health and developmental conditions. We provide resources and support for parents and practitioners who are ready to move beyond the conventional symptom suppressive approach to disease management and to instead use a root cause approach. And today is June 30th, 2025. It's the final day of our fundraiser in which you'll get free access to all of our videos, including the parent track and the practitioner track from our recent 2024 Documenting Hope conference with a donation of $75 or more. You can donate at documentinghope.com/donate. I'll put that link into the chat. And just a quick disclaimer about our webinar. This webinar is not a substitute for medical advice, treatment, diagnosis, or consultation with a medical professional. It is intended for general informational purposes only. It should not be relied upon to make determinations related to treatment of a medical condition. Documenting Hope is not verified, does not guarantee the accuracy of the information provided in this webinar. And today my guest is Jennifer O'Brien Payeur. She's the author of Ancient Plant Wisdom, this book, and how to improve and maintain your health using concentrated plant stem cell remedies, and the founder of Nature Provides and Divine Health Alliance. Their website is nature-provides.com. So hello, Jennifer. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, hi, Maria. Thank you so much for having me here. And hello, everyone.
Yeah. Well, you have such an exciting and inspiring story, and you were just talking a little bit about it before, about some more excitement that has come upon you. So maybe you could tell us your backstory, how you got into gemmotherapy, and all the fun things you have going forward.
Sure. So I spent 29 years in corporate. And what that entailed was a lot of travel, long hours, sitting in a desk under fluorescent lights. And when I go back to my childhood, right, and this is something that I ask people to do a lot because that's really the essence of who we are. And as a child, I was so connected to nature. There wasn't a tree I wasn't climbing, a creek I wasn't crawling in. And, I was connected to the animal kingdom and the plant kingdom extraordinaire. I loved being outside. And so I lost that connection of the natural world in those 29 years while I was either at a desk or on a plane.
Mhm.
And I had two major health crises as a result. And the first one happened in 2008, where I passed out at a work meeting in Boston. So I was traveling to Boston, and
Jeez.
I found out I had pneumonia, bronchitis, shingles, tachycardia, mono, and was finally diagnosed with chronic fatigue. And
Wow.
so that catapulted me into the natural world. So at that point, I was given Ambien and Xanax to calm down and prednisone and you name it. It was like, okay, you're just too high strung. Let's give you all these things. And nothing got better. I got worse.
Yeah.
And I realized at that point in time, back in '08, like that is not going to solve, the issue that I have. And so at that point, I went to a 4-year healing school called the Barbara Brennan School of Healing. I
Yes.
did, I did a two-year ministry study with the 13 indigenous grandmothers,
Nice.
became a medicinal aromatherapist, became yoga certified. So I was kind of, I know I'm kind of like a, game on personality. It was like, okay, what can I learn to find out what is going on? And then in 2012, I was diagnosed with DCIS, which is early stage, some will say stage 0, stage 1 breast cancer. And at that point, I knew I had to make a bigger shift. So while I was doing all those natural, trainings, I was still working my corporate job. I was
Oh,
still working, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20 hours a day. But I believe when you align to your purpose, the universe is going to support us. And
mhm.
so, somehow it didn't seem that hard. But that here I get this diagnosis, and I'm sure it was related to that immune system crash that I had. And
Mhm.
so I left my corporate job and I radically lowered my stress levels. Changed my diet. I had actually been very vegetarian and vegan for a long time. And so
Mhm.
I really started looking at and connecting to the food that I was eating and having a relationship with nature again. And everything was great. So 3 years out from that diagnosis, no change, everything's great. And then I had a vision of wearing a suit. And I told my husband, I said, I think I'm going to go back into a corporate job. And he said, why the heck would you do that? That makes no sense, Jen. I
Yeah.
said, I don't know. It's just what I'm seeing. And sure enough, 2 weeks later, a prior boss of mine called me and said, Jen, I need a strong leader. I would love for you to come work for me. And, I was trying to make sense of it. Why now? Why this? My life is great. But there was something that pulled me back. And
Hmm.
so I took the job a month later. And in May of 2015, I started. And in August of 2015, I had stage 4 breast cancer.
Wow.
So 3 months in of
Stress.
going something that was not aligned to my purpose. And it didn't take long for my body to respond. And again, it was that high stress environment
Wow.
and massive fight or flight, traveling cross country from North Carolina to California every week.
Mhm. And you have
And
kids, right?
yeah, 4 kids.
Yeah, and that
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, and raising a family, and
Yeah.
we were in all the sporting activities. So yeah, and that was like okay, that was the 2x4 that finally I said, okay, whatever it is, that's I'm still attached to this paycheck, I'm still attached to the ego and all of the things. I finally made the decision to leave,
Mhm.
and I left in 2017. And
Okay.
so at that point, then major radical shifts in my life. So that's where I came from. And I was inspired to film a documentary, and that came out late March. And it's really about my healing journey, how it happened, and then about these amazing plant remedies that I say found me. I didn't find them; they found me.
That's beautiful. How did they find you?
In 2018, my cancer markers were going up and I couldn't make any sense of it. And I'm going to share something after I tell you this story because I think it's an important message. I was talking to a friend and she said, "Well, my husband is a doctor and he works with a lot of people so that they don't have a reoccurrence. And so why don't you fly to Dallas?" So I got on a plane, went to Dallas, and he came out with this bottle. This is what it looks like. It's a tincture. It's a liquid
Okay.
tincture. And he said that, this is, helped a lot of my patients. It saved a lot of patients' lives. I'm like, oh, that's really great. What is it? And that question changed my life because as
Mhm.
soon as he said embryonic plant stem cells,
Hmm.
the only way I can describe it is I felt like I was struck by lightning.
Huh.
And I looked at him and I said, Dr. Michael, I have no idea what you just said to me. I just know every cell in my body is vibrating and I have to know more. So 3 months later, I found myself getting invited to a training in Hawaii. And on the last day of that training, the prior owner said, and I'm going to be selling the company. And boom, here comes that same feeling of lightning bolts coming through every cell in my body. And at that point, I knew, okay, this is why this happened. And I ended up buying the company 6 months later. So I had this guy put me on a protocol, and he put me on a protocol, and in a few months later, my cancer markers were back in the normal range, and
Wow.
it has been great for the last 10 years, ever since.
Wow. Was there anything else, if you don't mind me asking, anything else that you did,
Not at that
simultaneously?
point. No,
Change your
I did a
diet,
lot.
anything?
No,
Yeah.
stress levels were down. I think it was a universal divine intervention of, and the way I describe it is I am the steward of these plants.
Mm-hmm.
I now know nature doesn't want to be owned by anything or anyone. And I'm just the steward getting the message out because they play a very vital role in the toxic world that we're living in
Hmm.
today.
The ambassador.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. But
Yeah.
the message I wanted to come back to and share is that I'm a big believer when I look back at my life. I've had these amazing experiences of pure magic.
Hmm.
And I believe that as we get on our true path of what we are meant to bring out to the world, and we each have our own unique thing,
Right.
that everything aligns, and that's where you experience that spark. And so I've had many of these sparks in my life since making the change out of the banking world and into, into being this amazing steward of these plants.
Right. Yeah. And a big part of that, it sounds like, is following your intuition and following those signs and signals that your body gets, like you're tuning in to
A
that.
1000%. And when you
Yeah.
live this busy life, there's no space to do that, right? So it's
Right.
a big message that I teach is you have to slow down and be still to be able to hear the messages and to capture that magic.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that you went to the Barbara Brennan School. I have like her original book from, I think it's in 1988 or something like that.
Yes.
It's like,
Hands of light.
yes. And her other book after that, Light Emerging. Beautiful book. And you wrote in your book about how these plant stem cell remedies or gemmotherapy can help align the different bodies, like the physical, the mental, the emotional, the etheric, the spiritual bodies, and put them all into coherence, which is lovely. It sounds like
Yes.
you're living it.
Yes. And and it's important because we often when especially if there is a serious diagnosis or a chronic thing that has been ailing us, we see the physical body and that's usually where we focus. And one
Mhm.
of the big learnings I've had through my own experience is that is a small piece of the puzzle because the body is matter and matter is the last place where an
Mhm.
imbalance will fall, right? It first goes through all these other layers of us that we don't see, but we know are there. Our
Right.
emotional body, our mental body. What are we thinking? What are our thoughts that we're telling ourselves, 1,000 times a day, every day?
Mhm.
And there's a statistic that says we think 50 to 70,000 thoughts every day. And tomorrow we're going to think those exact same 50 to 70,000 thoughts.
How depressing.
So think about that. But that tells you how challenging it is to change those other
Yeah.
bodies, the emotional body, the mental body, our spiritual selves. And that's where plants shine because
Mhm.
have an intelligence and a
They do.
consciousness that is working with our own. So they're working on these other levels in a very subtle way
Right.
uh, that we may or may not be conscious of, but they are working those other levels of our humanity.
Right, right. And I would think that, if a person gets a diagnosis of cancer, especially if it's stage 4, you go into a state of fear and shock. And that's like the counterintuitive place that you need to be, right? Because you're saying you need to reach into your intuition and to be able to connect to those other, well, anyway, you know what I mean. So maybe you
Well,
could talk about that, how fear is like the opposite of what you need when you heal.
yeah. So, some of the messaging that I grew up with was go big, go home, no pain, no gain. So you
Mhm.
can imagine how that played out. So for me, working 18, 20 hours didn't phase me. It was like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm going to keep chugging. I'm going to keep chugging. And so it was so much going against my nature. It's no shock at all that I ended up with a diagnosis that I did. At first, I was totally shocked because I'm like, wait a minute, I'm the executive who will fly, land, go to the health food store, get all the organic fruits and vegetables, take them to my hotel room,
Yeah.
clean them, put them in the fridge, right? I was so
Yep.
meticulous in caring for my physical body from a food and an exercise. I mean, if I had to get up at 4 in the morning to exercise, I did.
Hmm.
And all of my colleagues would laugh. They're like, oh my gosh, why are you doing that? But really, I was so out of my true nature because I wasn't sleeping. Obviously, when you're working those kind of hours,
Yeah.
and that fight or flight was off the charts. So
Hmm.
when I got the diagnosis, it's not only the diagnosis for me, but there's a consciousness and an energetic around cancer, right? And that's the part that's like an overlay when you get that diagnosis. It's like, oh my gosh, the war on cancer. You've got to fight this.
Right.
And all of a sudden, all of those very low frequency and vibration words come into play and energies come into play.
Hmm.
And so I got my diagnosis like on a Thursday, and on Monday, it was like, okay, you got to have surgery. Let's get you in for chemo and radiation. And
Oh.
Right. And it's like, wait a minute, I've
Yeah.
had this for 8 to 10 years. Cancer doesn't just appear overnight.
Right.
And I had just ignored all the signals my body had been giving me.
Hmm.
But that's when my body was like, no, 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 no. And it was so clear inside of me that that was not my path, that the standard of care that I was being kind of really, ushered into this very fine line of, well, you can beat this and you can fight this.
It's like a
And the mess,
conveyor belt. I look at it.
oh, it
Yeah.
is.
It's like they just
Yes.
want to put you on that conveyor belt and vroom, and you don't have any agency after that.
Right. And that, yeah,
Yeah.
and you're totally giving up your power, right,
Yeah.
as an individual. And so the message that I received in my quiet time was that is not your path. Your path is to start to finally learn to love yourself, to stop
Mhm.
ignoring the signals that we've been giving you
Yeah.
all this time,
Woo.
and to, and to slowly move through this process with grace.
Right.
And
Right.
one of the experiences that I actually talk about in the documentary is I called my mom. I remember it very distinctly, to say, hey, I have stage 4 and I don't know if I'm going to make it.
Hmm.
And sorry. And
Yeah.
I had 4 young kids at the time, and
Oh,
I was terrified.
yeah.
Um,
For
and
them.
and literally in that moment when the words came out of my mouth, this hummingbird shows up in front of me.
Mm.
And it's literally an arm length from me. And, if you know hummingbirds, they don't really hang around humans a whole lot, right? They kind of flit in and flit out. And so
Right.
it sat there and hovered for, it felt like, an hour, but it was probably a minute. And then it zipped off. And in that moment, I knew in every cell of my body I was going to be okay. I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, I don't know how, I don't know why, but I know that there's something much bigger coming through me at this time. And then the hummingbird came back 2 more times.
I love that. I
The
love that.
3 times, which is a
Mhm.
magical number.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and it was because I paused and I didn't rush into something that I
Hmm.
was being funneled into. And
Yeah.
I started listening really, truly for the first time in my life. And that was in 2015.
Wow.